Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon, Magnetic Service. When a human being has to prepare their mind in such a way that the very structure and the psyche would have to be altered. If you had certain kinds of meters on his brain, you would see the preparation working. You'd see the various alpha and beta change. And not now. And the reason is because some time ago he gave permission for a meld that was continuous. A closer walk that would make him a more compassionate human being. At the same time, there would be no preparation for channel. You would have 1 foot in it and 1 foot out all the time. And so when it came time for 100%, all he did was step back. But the stepping back is the most difficult thing he does. All of this has to do with the human brain. What is involved in it that you know and that you don't know, and what is evolving for you to know. The channel tonight, informative, dealing with things we have not discussed before in this way, bringing a new concept forward. And it won't be complex because it's an introduction to an evolved concept of humans as they move forward into a new energy that is going to change the very fabric of their consciousness. And I want to explain things that I have never explained before, and some of them are controversial because of the way you think you have learned. And what you've explained may have to be rewritten. And I say before I start, do not take this and run with it because I said it. I want you to discern this with your own mind and measure it yourself for viability. Reality. Could it be that things are different than you thought? And if you think out of this box, it will start to validate some of the things you have seen and studied and taught. Only perhaps a little differently. The human mind is complex. And if you had to compartmentalize it and take a look at the different kinds of thinking, it would get even more complex. So far, the best you have been able to do is look at the human mind as a succinct operation of synapse that gives you everything. It gives you survival, it gives you intuition, it gives all of the body functions, it does everything, it drives the boat. And then you start piecing it together and you've discovered that the right and the left lobes do different things, that they're connected differently in men and women, that you can use them, that you can work with them, you can accomplish things if you try. And it's all centered around the brain. The concept we bring you this evening is that there is no single brain. There are 3. And in order for you to see this and see it clearly in the brief time we're together, I'm going to give you the best metaphoric illustration I can for what's going on. Under the pretense you don't know what you don't know, you've done your best. What else could you have done? All you have to look at is the brain. Therefore, the brain is all there is. Come with me on this metaphor. It's the best I can do to explain this. You're taking a look at a table. It's a workstation, and on the workstation there is a computer. Almost everyone listening will recognize it, and many have operated and know what it does. But an ancient would not. And so in this example, in this metaphor, in this allegory, we have an ancient of 100 years ago, not that ancient, coming forward to the workstation and being amazed at what they see. Without explanation, without help, without you being able to say anything, they discover and they see some of the magic that it can do, the computational skills that others would have and they could recognize it would take to operate it, and they start pressing buttons, they see things, it does things, and they marvel at the immensity. They discover Google. The world at their fingertips, all in a box. There isn't anything it doesn't know. All of the languages of the world are in the box. Any piece of information that they ever wanted is in the box. Anything. Amazing beyond belief. It is. And they walk away from the experience with an idea. They can hardly wait to tell what they've seen in the future to those 100 years ago, telling them about a box that does everything. All of the languages, all of the encyclopedias possible. Any question you ever wanted to ask, all of the individuals known through history, all that is there in the box. And that's the story they carry away. But you know better, don't you? You see, you know it was connected to the internet, and they didn't. If you disconnect the computer from the internet, it's simply a computer, a computational device. It computes. Oh, you may be able to write a letter on it. You may be able to do a spreadsheet on it, but you can't ask it anything, can you? Because it's not connected. And what the ancient did not understand or see or know or could even begin to conceive of was the World Wide Net. It didn't see the tiny cord that was plugged into the base of the computer that gave it the ability. There was magic. It knew everything about everything about everything. Now I bring you back to the brain. All you've got to look at is what you think is the brain, and you don't know the connection to the internet. Your brain is a synaptic computer. When we say synaptic, what we are saying, let me define it. Synapse is activation of pathways that are nerve pathways in the brain from one place to another at lightning speed, giving you the possibility to control your survival, your body, your thoughts in 3D. And you've looked at the brain and you've said, this is the creative side. You said, this is the side that is responsible for music, for artwork, for painting. You never saw the wire, did you? The brain has nothing to do with those. It facilitates them. Coming from the pineal and the intuitive part that is growing in evolution, the part that is connected to that which you call the higher self, or whatever you want to call it, that's the connection to the brain. And some have it, and some do not. And the door that opens to it is free choice. And the ones that are creating and creating and creating are connected to the net that is the pineal. And you see it as the brain. It's all you study. So we're going to say it again. The invisibility that you cannot see, the overlay that you do not recognize within the brain is this. The brain facilitates that which is the pineal. It does not create it. Intuition does not come from the brain. It's facilitated by the brain, and the brain then activates it into what you call thought. You can see it on the graphs. Thermography, all of the things that tell you what's going on in the brain will tell you, well, this is creation, this is not, this is what's being thought of, this is not, never seeing the wire. If you unplug the wire to the net, all the brain does is keep you breathing. And in survival, it gives you survival thinking. You run from the Bengal tiger so you won't be eaten. You can grow your food and you can learn how, but it won't write music. And it won't make sculpture. It doesn't naturally think of God. But when it's plugged in, it does. And what's confusing to you is that that which is the computer to the ancient facilitates the internet. Therefore, the ancient believes the box is doing everything. The brain seems the same way. It is not doing everything. The second brain of the human being that is superimposed upon that which is synaptical and biological is the pineal, and that is intuition. Intuition is starting to grow. It comes from that which is innate inside the body, passed at a greater frequency to you and strength as you evolve. The bridge between human consciousness and the smart body that is innate, that is the strength of intuition. This is being enhanced in the human being to a point where you're going to think the brain is doing better. It isn't. The brain remains the brain. It's in 3D. It's survival instrument. It's a survival organ. But intuition is going to get stronger and stronger, facilitated. Your internet's getting faster. In 3D, you only see one, but there really are three. The evolved human being has a tendency to create light. And I just gave you something you should really listen to. There's a perception of spirituality being white light. It's everywhere. You've seen it everywhere. There's the story of Moses and the burning bush. This was a flame that did not consume itself, but if you could really see it in reality, it was a white light. It was a higher consciousness than he had ever seen before, an angelic energy coming through his pineal, projecting it to him. When you have an NDE, a near-death experience, you go to the light. This is more than metaphoric. You start to create something we will call is divinity and mastery. White light coming from you, the higher you evolve. The more your DNA sufficiency is increased, the whiter the light gets. This is a metaphor. But there is truth often behind all mythology, and this is one of those. Dear ones, you are becoming more angelic when you add the third part. We have told you before that there is a mystery going on that involves the human heart. The human heart, dear ones, is the third part of the brain. Science has never understood why the heart has such a tremendous magnetic field. It is higher than any other organ, including the brain, with all of its synaptic power. The heart overshadows it in so many ways. And yet, examination of the heart corporally will give you the information that it simply pushes and pumps blood. And yet, there is more. We gave you the information to connect the dots when the spinal cord is severed in an accident with a human being. The heart continues pumping. The signals that supposedly come from the brain that survive, that make the body survive, are disconnected. The rhythms are gone. And the heart keeps pumping. Digestion continues. Liver continues. Pancreas continues. Reproduction continues without the brain. There is a third element of consciousness centered in the human heart. You have seen it metaphorically as the symbol of love. And you're right. There's three parts to human consciousness that go beyond the brain. It's the trilogy of survival. It's the three. And if you want to know about the three horses that pulled the chariot of the Merkaba of Elijah, they were intuition, the brain, and the heart. The recognition of the consciousness of the individual working perfectly as a master. It's time to connect them. Dear ones, what separates a human being in survival and a master is compassion. Dear ones, compassion is generated from the heart, and it's not a metaphor. It is part of the brain. There are things going on in this trilogy that you should understand, connect the dots, start using science to find out, and recognize there are things that are not visible to any spectrum yet that you have not discovered. And the brain is responsible for facilitating them all. And yet, the other two are doing the work. Connect yourself to a bigger picture. That's all we want to tell you now. Something for you to digest, think about, and ask, is it true? Could it be that the human brain was only a facilitator for something bigger? It starts to explain some measurements you never could explain, dear ones. It starts to explain why it is when a human being makes certain kinds of decisions, suddenly the brain acts better. Why is it that corporeal health can actually change, heal itself, ask for other kinds of food suddenly? Dear ones, unless you were connected, you wouldn't see that. it wasn't the brain that gave it to you. It's the brain that facilitated the connection. And the net connection is the creative source, white light. It is the way we begin the teaching of profound things that we will labor on and elaborate on and talk endlessly about so that you get it. It's time you knew the grander picture of the triad, the trilogy of creation inside the human being. I am Kryon, in love with humanity, and for good reason. And so it is. Greetings, dear ones. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. We have spoken of this many times and in many ways. Are you or are you not a divine creature of God? If you don't want to say the word God, say of the creative source. Are you or are you not related to the divinity of the universe? And most of you will say, well, I have a soul. That means that I probably am. And you're right. We've said it before. Most of the planet believes in the afterlife. Now, this means there is a strong belief that comes from innate, that says that after you die and perish in a biological form, there's something that remains. And that something you can call whatever, a soul, and that something is still you in some way, a consciousness something that is not in the body. This is the clear and constant, unanimous thinking of most of the planet. Over 80% of you believe in the afterlife. This 80% means that most of Earth understands you have a soul. Now, what does that mean to you, really? Honestly. If you want to go back to the ancients and the teaching and the training thereof, the soul also resides loosely in a vehicle called the Merkaba. Now, that is a Hebrew word that loosely means to ride. The human soul rides in this Merkaba, which has been described as a field energy, a bubble, approximately 8 meters wide. This is ancient information, known for a very, very long time. And it's something that describes this field that you sit in. Indeed, is that field three-dimensional? Is your soul three-dimensional? And you would say, oh no, the soul must be multidimensional, and it is. Some even say quantum. Your body sits in a field of unity. And that means that one thing affects another, affects another, affects another. Is it possible that even the chemistry, number one, of your body has multidimensional attributes? This was actually shown and proven many times over by those who asked that question and dared to test it. One of the first, almost 2 decades ago, was Vladimir Poponin, a Russian scientist who decided to use photons of light in an experiment with DNA. And in the DNA's field, he watched those photons of light do things that they were never supposed to do. He realized that what he was seeing is light, which is multidimensional. It can be in 2 places at the same time, interacts with human biology as though biology was interdimensional as well. He saw it. Others have seen it. We teach it. So the first premise of everything is that your biology, your simple chemistry, your DNA itself, has multidimensional aspects and attributes. So if this is so, it means that even the chemistry layer, even the 3D layer number 1, that the doctors will push and pull on with the chemistry of the day, of the drugs of the day, even that is multidimensional. Let me ask you, are you using any multidimensional tools to react with that chemistry layer? Your medicine isn't. It's using 3D to push on a multidimensional source. There are side effects for every single push. No matter what you give this body, there are side effects, except for one thing. Something else you've discovered. You discovered it hundreds of years ago, and yet you've never developed it into a common truth. And here it is. You've discovered that you could give tinctures of instruction sets to the number 1 layer of chemistry without side effects. Instruction sets that were so tiny in their chemistry that even though you have chemistry pushing on chemistry, the body saw it, recognized it, and obeyed it. Obeyed it, meaning this: you give it an instruction and it obeys. You have a headache, you give it a tincture called homeopathy. The body cannot actually see that as chemistry, but it sees it instead as an instruction. Do you get that? It does not see it as chemistry. It sees it as an instruction, and the headache leaves. There's something in your chemical body called the smart body, innate. This is part of the chemistry, built in. It's the smart body because it is used many times by even the physicians who understand kinesiology to test what you don't know about yourself. The smart body will work with muscles, giving you information that never could be given any other way. Suddenly, you're opening a door even to layer number 1 that says, look, the basic 3D chemistry isn't 3D. It must be multidimensional because it's responding seemingly in a non-allopathic way to signal sets being given to it. What do you think of this whole idea of a smart body? That smart body, dear ones, has been given to you so you can ask it questions, so it will know more than you do. It's only touched the surface in what it knows. That number 1 set, called chemistry, is far grander and greater than anything you would imagine. It has to be. Number 1 layer, called chemistry, is the engine of the body. It is the engine. Everything starts and stops at the engine. The engine either propels you forward or doesn't. It either works or it doesn't. It doesn't partially work because that leads then to failure. This engine of yours is constantly rejuvenated over decades and decades and decades. It's a smart engine. It's even more smart than you know. But everything starts and stops at the engine. So the chemistry layer is critical. Now you start asking the questions. What is it that you could do to give instruction sets to the basic chemistry engine that would change it? Question. To those who work in homeopathy, when you give a tincture, a remedy, to a human being, and the human being then is cured. Question, can you see it in the chemistry? Does the microscope reveal the cure? The answer, yes it does. Indeed. Yes, it does. Because the engine is the engine. The chemistry must change in order for the healing to have occurred. So if you give a tincture for an immune boost, for instance, something that is supposed to make you less susceptible to disease, if you tested the human being, would you see an increase in the white blood count? The answer is yes. You see, homeopathy works. It changes the chemistry. Against all things that you might expect, homeopathy is the key to the understanding of instruction sets that change the chemistry physically in the body. So everything I'm going to talk about in that which is the healing would change the chemistry. It has to. That's the engine. Do you know people who have had cure from disease? Do you know people who have had a remission to the extent that disease is gone? Do you have any friends who might have had a divine healing? And if they had a divine healing, quickly, if you look at their chemistry in a microscope, does it change? And the answer is yes. You see, the divine healing changed the engine. So the chemistry, layer one, the engine of the body will always react, will always change with the instruction sets that follow. Up to now, your instruction sets, dear ones, have been pills. And those pills aren't really instruction sets. They're reactionary. A chemical pushes against a chemical to cause another chemical to change, and in the process, many change. Because you see, there is a unity of field. When you change one thing, other things move and other things change. Now, in the allopathic number one layer of chemistry, that isn't so good. But let me tell you something. If you give the right instruction set that doesn't push against chemistry but changes the reaction, there is no side effect. It's a cascading healing. Remember that word. A cascading healing, where you give an instruction set for the body to strengthen itself in one way, and it strengthens itself in all ways, because that is the way the engine works. When you give the engine a certain kind of chemistry, if it's your car, you give it certain kind of oil or gasoline or whatever it is, that's not all that gets improved. It runs better, it acts better, it lasts longer. There's no side effect. So what I'm telling you is this. You're going to develop instruction sets that create cascading healing, not chemistry that pushes against each other and has side effects, but chemistry that changes its reaction to itself. Chemistry that changes reactions to itself. Kryon, what are you talking about? Ask the person who had the healing from cancer. What did the microscope show? And they'll say, doctor said I'm free of cancer. So you mean it's not still there and some divine angel is sitting on it? You say, well, how silly of you to say that. Well, what else would have happened? Of course it changed the chemistry. You wouldn't be alive if it didn't. I want you to get the point. Everything we're going to talk about changes the chemistry, but it changes how the chemistry looks at itself. Enter layer two. Layer two, your inheritance. If you're a three-dimensional thinker and you don't want anything to do with this message, you're going to say, genes are genes are genes. You can't change them. They will always be there. And if you have a propensity for disease that your sister had, your mother had, your father had, it remains. It's there. It changes your cellular structure. It pushes upon it. Propensities are that way. Propensity meaning you're going to get it. Chances are it's going to push the chemistry into disease like it did your relatives. So the inheritance very three-dimensional, is looked at with all of the chemistry by all doctors to see what are your propensities to catch these certain things or to develop these certain things. What did I tell you when we started? You sit in a field where everything reacts with everything. You've already discovered that homeopathy is a signal set which is not really linear, is it? Because you're not giving chemistry other chemistry, you're giving it a tincture. So many parts per million that are so minuscule, it couldn't possibly have a chemical reaction. And that is proven. So why does it change? It changes because it saw the instructions somehow from a source that yet you have yet to understand or discover or really recognize its importance. What if I told you this? There are signal sets that can talk to the inheritance part of your body. And it doesn't take away the gene, dear ones, because those who can count the genes, those who can recognize them, the science that could say you have the gene for this or that, that does not change. The chemistry didn't change in that point, but what did was the body's reaction to the gene. You just rewrote the program. Is it possible that you can rewrite a program in your body that is a program that gives you a predisposition for disease? Well, if you knew how this amazing body of yours works, it's programmed. All of it. It works a certain way because it's programmed to work that way. It's programmed as part of the genome. And what you're doing is coming in and rewriting that program. It's not spectacularly odd, dear ones. It's not woo-woo, dear ones. You're simply changing that template of the programming that's already there. Kryon, I don't understand what you're saying. Are you saying that if I have the gene for a certain disease, that I can rewrite that whole thing and it won't give me that disease? Welcome to understanding. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. So even within the first two layers, there's miracles. I haven't even touched on the woo-woo yet. Yes, you can rewrite. How do I reprogram? Kryon, tell me, what is the process? What do I go through? For 31 years, I gave you the answers. Book after book, channel after channel. It's all there. It starts with your belief. What you cognize in your brain becomes your reality. Adironda, who was channeling before me, they said the same thing. What you imagine, you can create. What you think changes outcomes. We have said this so many times, and now that is even becoming the reality. Some of science is even starting to see that those who would imagine they're always sick become sick. And those who imagine that they are always well never become sick. And they say consciousnness must therefore play some kind of part of health. If I tell you that gravity is going to take over when you jump off a bank of a river and to go into the water, do you say, really? Really? I think I'll try it. You don't try it, you go into the water, you see? You have to cognize it, understand it's got to be yours. You have to work on yourself to the point where you say, I am a creature who is quantum. I have the ability in this soul of mine to sit in the field and work with my own chemistry. Affirmations come into play, dear ones. Affirmations where you are telling yourself over and over a truth that then becomes the truth. I am strong. I am healthy. I am free of disease. Do you know the power of that? the engine of your body, the physical chemistry of your body will change. And they will be able to test it in laboratories. Why is it, Mr., Miss, whatever, that we're seeing your system so much stronger than it was the last time you were here? What are you doing? What pills are you taking today? We want to know. And if you say it's the pill of belief, it's the pill I'm taking now of taking charge of my own body. That's 1 and 2. That's just basic 3-dimension thinking around a quantum energy that is there, that you don't fully understand. Healing is far easier than you think. It is not a mystery. But if you believe everything you were told about what you can and cannot do, nothing's going to happen. Your inheritance, it's like a program that will carry out its destiny. Unless you change it. Unless you change it. You sit in a field of opportunity, of abilities, that no one really has told you about, that will be able to create healings in your body with and without help, but especially if you get a healer who will lead you through some of these difficulties. And they're watching now. They're watching now. And they're going, yes, continue, Kryon. Give it to them. Those healers are the ones who will take you by the hand and say, here is how it's done. And that's why they are watching this program. That's why they exist as old souls on this planet, because there are so many who don't truly understand how to believe. What do you do, human being, when all your life you're told something is a certain way and suddenly you learn that's not true, or that may not be true, or there could be another way? What's your first impression? It's walk the other way, isn't it? Well, maybe that will change as well. There's new energies on this planet, dear ones. I am Kryon, in love with humanity for good reason, being able to give you information because of that love. Because of that love. And so it is.